Cold open. The static arrives at 2:14 a.m. through every television in the Clearwater Heights apartment complex simultaneously, cutting through late-night programming and streaming services and blank screens left on standby, replacing pixels with interference that looks almost like snow but is not snow, is something denser, something that has pattern if you look at it long enough, if you let your eyes unfocus and your mind stop trying to make sense of what it is seeing and just receive the information that is being transmitted through the interference itself. Detective Sarah Reeves stands in apartment 804, the 9th apartment she has checked tonight, the 9th television showing the same static, the 9th resident who called the building manager, who called the police because their television turned itself on at exactly 2:14 a.m. and will not turn off, will not respond to the remote or the power button, or unplugging it from the wall because the static continues even when the power cord is disconnected, even when the cable is removed, even when there should be no source for the signal that is filling the screen with interference that is starting to resolve into shapes if you watch it long enough, into patterns that look almost like a city if cities were built from noise instead of from concrete and steel and glass. The resident of 804 is an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who keeps saying it's not right, it's not natural. Televisions don't work when they're unplugged. And Sarah agrees. Says, yes, ma'am, that's true. Says, yes, we're investigating. Says, yes, we'll figure out what's causing it. While inside her head she is counting apartments and doing the math, and realizing that if every television in this building is doing the same thing, then they are looking at a phenomenon that is either a very sophisticated prank or something else, something that does not have a name yet, something that will require a new category of explanation. She takes out her phone to call it in, to request backup or technical support, or whoever the department sends to investigate mass electronic malfunction. But when she unlocks the screen, she sees that her phone is also showing static, the same static as the televisions, the same pattern that is almost a city, almost a message, almost something that could be decoded if she had the right training or the right equipment or the right mindset to accept that signals can come from places other than broadcast towers and satellite dishes and streaming servers. She puts the phone away, tells Mrs. Chen she will be back, goes down the hallway checking apartments, knocking on doors, confirming that yes, every television in the building is showing the same static, every screen that can receive a signal is receiving this signal, and the signal is getting stronger, is getting clearer, is starting to resolve from interference into actual images if you watch long enough, if you stop trying to change the channel and just watch what is being shown. By apartment 8112, the static has mostly cleared, and Sarah can see what is underneath, a city that looks like this city but is not this city, a version of the downtown skyline that has buildings in the wrong places and streets that run at the wrong angles, and a sky that is the wrong color, is too dark or too bright or too something that makes it clear this is not footage of a real place, but footage of a place that exists in relation to a real place, that is parallel to reality rather than part of it. That is what you would see if you could look at the city from outside the city, from a position that does not exist in three-dimensional space, but exists somewhere else, somewhere perpendicular to here. The image on the screen is moving now, is camera footage from a perspective that is traveling through this parallel city, through streets that are familiar but wrong, past buildings that Sarah recognizes but that are different, that have more floors or fewer floors or different windows, or are made from materials that do not exist in the version of the city she patrols every night. The camera moves with purpose, with direction, is following a route that Sarah knows, that she drives regularly, that she has memorized from 3 years of working night shift in this district. The camera is showing her patrol route. The camera is showing the path she drives between here and the station, showing the intersections she passes and the buildings she parks beside and the alley where she sometimes takes breaks to drink coffee and catch up on paperwork. The camera is showing these places in this parallel city, this version that exists in the static. And as Sarah watches, she realizes that the camera is not just showing the route, it is showing it in real time, is showing her car in this parallel version, is showing herself driving through streets that look like her streets but are not her streets, are streets that exist in the space between broadcast and reception, between signal and screen, between the city as it is and the city as it is being transmitted. She runs down the hallway, down the stairs, because the elevator is too slow and she needs to move now, needs to get to her patrol car, needs to confirm whether what she is seeing on the screens is actually happening, or is some kind of pre-recorded footage that just happens to match her route, just happens to show her car, just happens to be playing at the exact moment when she would be driving that route if she were driving instead of investigating televisions in apartment buildings at 2:14 a.m. She reaches the parking lot, and yes, there is her patrol car, exactly where she left it, exactly as it should be, not driving through a parallel city, but parked in this city, in the real city, in the version that does not require static to access. She gets in, starts the engine, checks her dashboard camera to confirm that it recorded her parking here, that there is documentation proving she has been in this building for the last 45 minutes and could not possibly be driving through downtown at the same time. The dashboard camera shows static, the same static as the televisions, the same pattern that resolves into the parallel city if you watch long enough. And in that parallel city, on that screen, Sarah can see her patrol car pulling out of a parking lot that looks like this parking lot but is not this parking lot. Can see herself behind the wheel even though she is sitting here watching herself on a screen. Can see herself driving south on Meridian Avenue toward downtown, even though she is sitting still, even though the engine just started, even though she has not put the car in gear yet. The static shows her where she is going before she decides to go there. The static shows her what she will do before she does it. The static is not broadcasting from a place but from a time, from 3 or 4 or 5 minutes ahead of now, from a version of tonight that is happening slightly faster than this version, that is running ahead like a preview, like a trailer, like a warning about what comes next if you keep following the route that the route requires you to follow, if you keep making the choices that the job requires you to make, if you keep being the person you have been trained to be instead of being someone else, someone who could choose differently, someone who could break the pattern that the static is showing. Sarah puts the car in reverse, backs out of the parking space, watches the dashboard screen where the static version of her is also backing out, is also leaving, is also making the same choices because the choices are not really choices when the system has been designed to eliminate all the options except the one that the system requires. She drives. The static shows her driving. She turns left on Meridian. The static shows her turning left on Meridian 3 seconds before she turns. She accelerates to match the speed limit. The static shows her accelerating to match the speed limit before her foot reaches the pedal. The radio in her patrol car crackles to life, even though she did not turn it on, even though it should not be able to activate itself, even though police radios are built with safeguards against exactly this kind of interference. The voice that comes through is her own voice, but not her voice processed through filters or delays or distance, her voice reading an address that she recognizes, an abandoned warehouse district on the east side where they found a body last month, where they found 2 bodies, the month before that, where they keep finding evidence of things that should not be happening but are happening anyway, because someone or something has decided that this part of the city is where the rules are different, where the normal constraints do not apply, where the boundary between what is possible and what is actually occurring has worn thin enough that crossings can happen, that transmissions can bleed through, that static can resolve into images of parallel cities where versions of you are already making the choices you have not made yet. She drives toward the address because that is what the job requires, because that is what the training dictates, because that is what cops do when they receive calls about disturbances in warehouse districts where bodies get found regularly enough that everyone has stopped being surprised. She drives toward the address even though the static is showing her driving toward the address, even though she is following a script that has already been written, even though the version of tonight that is broadcasting itself through every screen in the city has already played this scene and knows how it ends, and is showing her the ending 3 minutes before she arrives at it. The static on the dashboard screen resolves completely now, clears into an image that is no longer interference but is actual footage, is camera perspective from inside the warehouse, is showing the interior space lit by work lights that create shadows in directions that shadows should not go, is showing a floor covered in something that looks like water but is not water, is something thicker, is something that reflects light differently, is something that Sarah has seen before at crime scenes but has never seen this much of, has never seen it covering an entire warehouse floor like it is meant to be there, like it has purpose, like it is part of whatever is happening in the warehouse instead of being evidence of what has already happened. In the center of the floor, in the center of the liquid that is not water, is a chair. In the chair is a person. The person is facing away from the camera, facing a wall covered in televisions, dozens of televisions, all showing static, all showing that same pattern that resolves into the parallel city, if you watch long enough, into the version of tonight that runs 3 minutes ahead, into the future that is broadcasting itself backward through every screen in the city to make sure the past knows what is coming, to make sure the choices that seem like choices are actually just following the script that has already been written by the version of you that exists 3 minutes ahead. Sarah arrives at the warehouse at 2:47 a.m. according to her dashboard clock, at exactly the time the static predicted she would arrive, at exactly the moment that the broadcast showed her pulling up to the entrance with her headlights cutting through darkness that is too dark, that is darker than night should be, that suggests this warehouse exists in a pocket where the normal rules about illumination and shadow have been suspended or revised or replaced with rules that serve different purposes. She gets out of the car with her weapon drawn because the training says to draw your weapon when entering potentially dangerous situations, because the protocol says to assume threat until threat has been eliminated, because 3 years of working this district has taught her that warehouses where bodies are found are places where more bodies might be made if you do not approach with appropriate caution. She approaches. The entrance is unlocked. Of course it is. Entrances in these situations are always unlocked. Always waiting, always ready to receive whoever follows the signal that brought them here. Chapter 1. The warehouse interior is exactly as the static showed it. Work lights creating wrong shadows. Floor covered in liquid that is not water. Chair in the center with a person sitting in it, facing away from the entrance. Wall of televisions beyond the chair, all showing static that is starting to clear, starting to resolve into images that Sarah can almost recognize, can almost understand if she stops trying to categorize them as normal and just accepts them as what they are, as transmissions from somewhere else, somewhere that is not here but is related to here, is parallel to here, is what here becomes if you change one variable and let the change propagate through the system until the system itself is different, is transformed, is no longer the thing it was, but is also not entirely separate from what it was. Sarah calls out, identifies herself as police, states that the person in the chair should stand up slowly with their hands visible, follows the protocol that is designed to establish control of the situation, to assert authority, to make clear that she represents the system that enforces rules and that the rules require compliance, require cooperation, require that people in chairs do what they are told when officers with weapons drawn give them instructions. The person in the chair does not move, does not respond, does not acknowledge that Sarah has spoken at all, just sits there facing the wall of televisions, watching the static, watching it resolve into images that Sarah can see now from her position near the entrance, can see clearly enough to recognize what they are showing. This warehouse, this moment, this scene from multiple angles, from perspectives that should require cameras mounted in corners and on ceilings and along the walls, but there are no cameras visible. There are only televisions receiving signals from somewhere, from some position outside this space, that can see into this space, that can observe what is happening here, and broadcast it back to here 3 minutes ahead of when it happens, so that the screens can show you what you are about to do before you do it. On the television, Sarah can see herself approaching the chair, can see herself 3 minutes in the future walking across the warehouse floor through liquid that is not water, can see herself reaching out to touch the shoulder of the person sitting in the chair to verify whether they are alive or dead or something else, something in between, something that requires a category that has not been invented yet, because the normal categories of alive and dead assume that those are the only options when there might be others, might be states of being that exist between or beside or perpendicular to the states we have language for. She walks toward the chair because that is what she does in the broadcast, because that is what the script requires, because the version of her that exists 3 minutes ahead has already made this walk, and the version of her that exists now is just following the path that has been cleared for her, is just executing the sequence of actions that have been determined by the version of tonight that runs faster than this version, that knows what comes next, because it has already experienced what comes next, and is transmitting that experience backward to make sure this version happens the same way, makes the same choices, follows the same script. The liquid on the floor is cold when she steps into it, cold and thick, and it clings to her boots in a way that water does not cling, that suggests molecular properties that are different from water even though it looks like water, even though it flows like water when she disturbs it by walking through it. She crosses the warehouse floor, and the televisions show her crossing 3 minutes from now, show her from angles that should not exist, from positions that would require cameras floating in midair or embedded in walls that are solid, or existing in dimensions that are perpendicular to the three she can access. She reaches the chair, reaches out, touches the shoulder of the person sitting in it. The shoulder is warm. The person is alive. The person does not move when touched, but Sarah can feel breathing, can feel the small movements that living bodies make, even when they are trying to be still, can feel evidence of metabolism and respiration, and all the processes that indicate this is a person and not a body, is alive and not dead, is present and not absent, even though their refusal to respond suggests a kind of absence, suggests someone who is here but also not here, who exists in this chair but also exists somewhere else, somewhere the televisions are showing, somewhere 3 minutes ahead, where the static has cleared completely, and the broadcasts show not a parallel city, but something else, something that does not look like any city, that does not look like any place that exists in 3 dimensions. Sarah walks around the chair to see the person's face. It takes exactly 12 steps to circle the chair. She counts them without meaning to. Counts them because counting is what you do when you are trying to maintain control, when you are trying to impose order on a situation that feels like it is slipping away from order, that feels like it is becoming chaos or is revealing that it was always chaos and you were just not looking at it correctly. The face belongs to someone she knows. The face belongs to Officer Michael Torres, her partner from 2 years ago, the partner who requested transfer to a different district after 6 months of working nights in this district, who said he could not handle the things they saw here, could not handle the bodies in the warehouses and the calls that came at wrong times, and the feeling that the city at night was different from the city during the day, was not just darker, but fundamentally different, was governed by different rules, was a place where things could happen that would not be allowed to happen if anyone was watching, but no one watches at night, except the people who work at night, and they learn to not see things, to not report things, to not ask questions about things that are easier to ignore than to acknowledge. Torres's eyes are open, but not blinking. His pupils are dilated. He is breathing slowly, regularly, with the rhythm of someone in a deep state of meditation or sedation or something else, something that requires consciousness but does not require the kind of active consciousness that allows you to respond when someone touches your shoulder, when someone says your name, when someone shines a flashlight in your face to check pupil response and sees that the pupils do not constrict, do not react, do not change even though the light is bright enough to cause pain, if pain is something Torres can currently experience. On the televisions behind Torres, the broadcast has changed. The static is gone completely. The screens now show this warehouse from multiple angles, show this moment from perspectives that cycle through different positions, different heights, different orientations, showing Sarah standing next to Torres in the chair, showing her from the front and the back and the sides, showing her from above as if there is a camera mounted on the ceiling, except when Sarah looks up, there is no camera mounted on the ceiling, except when Sarah looks up, there is no camera mounted on the ceiling. There is only ceiling. There are only the work lights casting their wrong shadows. There are only the structural elements that hold the building together, and nothing else. No cameras, no equipment, no visible source for the signal that is being received by the televisions. Sarah's radio crackles again. The voice that comes through is not her voice this time. The voice belongs to Torres. The voice is reading coordinates, is giving GPS locations that correspond to positions in this warehouse, is identifying the exact latitude and longitude of the chair where Torres sits, is specifying the elevation and the orientation and the timestamp, and all the metadata that would allow someone to locate this exact position in space and time, if someone had a reason to locate it, if someone needed to find this moment. If someone was searching for the intersection between here and elsewhere, between now and 3 minutes from now, between the city that exists and the city that is being broadcast through the static. Chapter 2. Sarah tries to move Torres, tries to lift him from the chair, tries to carry him back to the patrol car and get him to a hospital where doctors can determine what is wrong with him, what has been done to him, what substance he has been exposed to, or what trauma he has experienced that has put him in this state of being present but not responsive, of being alive but not participating in his own life, of being here but also somewhere else that the televisions are showing, that the broadcast is revealing 3 minutes at a time. But when she tries to lift him, she discovers that he is heavy in a way that bodies are not usually heavy, that he has mass that exceeds what muscle and bone and water should weigh, that he is somehow denser than he should be, or is somehow connected to the chair in a way that prevents movement, that keeps him anchored to this position, that makes it impossible to separate him from this spot where he sits, watching televisions, that show him watching televisions in a recursive loop that extends forward 3 minutes at a time, that shows him seeing himself see himself in an infinite regression that should be impossible but is happening anyway, because the normal rules about what can be shown on television do not apply here, do not function in warehouses where the floor is covered in liquid that is not water, and the shadows go in directions that shadows should not go. She stops trying to move him, accepts that he is staying here, that he is part of whatever this is, that he has already been integrated into the system that creates the broadcasts, that transmits the static, that shows the city 3 minutes ahead of the city as it currently exists. She steps back from the chair, and the televisions show her stepping back 3 minutes from now, show her making the decision to stop trying to move Torres before she consciously makes that decision. Show her accepting what she has not yet accepted but will accept, because the broadcast shows her accepting it, and the broadcast is always right, is always accurate, is always showing what will happen, because what will happen has already happened 3 minutes ahead and is being transmitted backward to make sure it happens here, the same way it happened there. The liquid on the floor is moving now, is flowing in patterns that are not random, that form shapes Sarah recognizes as letters if she looks at them from the right angle, from the position where she is standing, from the perspective that the broadcast requires her to occupy. The liquid spells words. The words say, "You are watching the city, watch itself." The words reform. The words say, "The signal comes from what comes next." The words reform again. The words say, "Torres saw what you are about to see." Sarah takes out her phone to document this, to photograph the words in the liquid, to record evidence that can be reviewed later by people who were not here, who did not see this, who will need proof before they believe that liquids can spell words and televisions can show the future, and officers can become part of broadcast systems that transmit the city watching itself. But when she activates the camera, the phone shows static, shows the same pattern that was on the televisions earlier, shows the interference that resolves into the parallel city if you watch long enough, into the version that exists 3 minutes ahead, into the broadcast that is showing this moment from an angle that requires the camera to be behind Sarah, even though she is holding the phone in front of her, even though the perspective should be forward-facing but is backward-facing, is showing her from behind, holding a phone that shows her from behind in a loop that extends infinitely in both directions. She puts the phone away, accepts that documentation is not possible, that evidence cannot be collected, that this is an experience that exists only in the experiencing of it, and cannot be translated into formats that work outside this warehouse, outside this moment, outside the 3-minute window where the broadcast is strongest, where the signal is clearest, where the city watches itself, watching itself in a feedback loop that is either revealing something that was always there, or creating something new, creating a phenomenon that did not exist before the broadcast started, but exists now because enough people are watching, because enough screens are receiving the signal, because enough of the city has tuned in to the transmission that shows the city to itself 3 minutes before the city arrives at the moment being shown. The televisions change again. The perspectives shift. Instead of showing this warehouse from multiple angles, they now show different locations, different parts of the city, different scenes that are happening right now 3 minutes in the future. A convenience store where the clerk is being robbed by someone whose face is covered, an intersection where 2 cars are about to collide, an apartment building where fire is starting to spread from a kitchen where someone left the stove on, a bridge where someone is standing on the wrong side of the railing, looking down at water that is dark and cold and final. Sarah recognizes the pattern. These are crimes in progress. These are emergencies. These are situations that require police response, that require officers to be dispatched, that require someone to intervene before the robbery becomes a murder, before the collision becomes a fatality, before the fire becomes an inferno, before the person on the bridge makes the choice that cannot be unmade. These are the calls that will come through dispatch in 3 minutes, that will be reported by witnesses who see them happening, that will require Sarah to leave this warehouse and respond to locations across the city where her presence is needed, where her intervention could make the difference between tragedy and near miss. But she is here. She is standing in a warehouse with her former partner, who has become part of a broadcast system that shows the future 3 minutes before the future arrives. She cannot be in multiple places simultaneously. She cannot respond to all the emergencies that are being shown on the screens. She has to choose which call to answer, which crisis to address, which intervention to make, knowing that the ones she does not choose will play out exactly as the broadcast shows them playing out, will become the realities that were always going to become realities unless someone intervened, unless someone made a different choice, unless someone broke the pattern that the broadcast is revealing. Her radio crackles. Dispatch is calling. Dispatch is sending her to the convenience store, where the robbery is happening 3 minutes from now. Dispatch is following the script that the broadcast has already written. Dispatch is making sure Sarah responds to the call that will put her in the position where the system needs her to be, where the city requires her presence, where the broadcast can continue showing what comes next, because what comes next includes her choices, includes her interventions that either succeed or fail, but always happen exactly as the broadcast shows them happening, because the broadcast is not showing predictions, is not showing possibilities, is showing what will happen, because what will happen has already happened 3 minutes ahead and is being transmitted backward to ensure it happens here the same way. Sarah looks at Torres one more time before leaving. His eyes are still open, still not blinking, still staring at the televisions that show him staring at televisions. She wants to ask him what he sees when he looks at those screens. She wants to know what the broadcast showed him that made him request a transfer, that made him leave this district, that made him stop working nights because the things he saw here were things he could not continue seeing, could not continue experiencing, could not integrate into his understanding of what police work was supposed to be about. But Torres is not here to ask. Torres is somewhere else. Somewhere the broadcast is showing. Somewhere 3 minutes ahead, where he already knows what Sarah is about to ask, and has already not answered, because the state he is in does not permit answering, does not permit the kind of active participation that conversation requires, does not permit anything except watching the broadcasts and being part of the broadcasts and existing in the 3-minute gap between what is happening now and what is being shown on screens across the city. Chapter 3. Sarah leaves the warehouse and drives to the convenience store that was shown on the broadcast, arrives exactly 3 minutes after the image appeared on the television screens, arrives exactly when the robbery should be in progress according to the transmission that came through every screen in the city. But when she enters the store with her weapon drawn, when she announces herself as police, when she prepares to intervene in the crime that the broadcast showed happening at this time in this place, she discovers that the robbery has not happened yet, is not happening now, has been prevented by her arrival because the clerk saw the broadcast too, saw what was going to happen 3 minutes before it happened, and locked the doors and called the police and refused to open when the robber arrived expecting to find an unlocked store with a clerk who did not know what was coming. The would-be robber is standing outside the store looking confused, looking at his phone, which Sarah can see from here is showing static, is showing the same interference pattern that every screen in the city is showing, is receiving the same broadcast that shows the city watching itself 3 minutes ahead of itself. The robber looks at his phone, looks at the locked store, looks at Sarah approaching with her weapon drawn, and makes a choice that the broadcast did not show. He runs, leaves, abandons the robbery that he came here to commit, because the conditions that the robbery required have changed, have been altered by the intervention that the broadcast made possible, have been transformed from opportunity into trap because the clerk knew 3 minutes in advance exactly when and how the crime would be attempted. Sarah does not pursue. The crime has been prevented. No one has been hurt. The intervention worked exactly as it should have worked, exactly as the system intended it to work when the broadcast started, when someone decided that showing the city what was coming 3 minutes in advance would allow people to make better choices, to avoid dangers, to prevent crimes and accidents and tragedies that were otherwise inevitable, that were already in motion, that would have happened if no one had been warned but did not happen because the warning arrived in time. Her radio crackles again. Dispatch is sending her to the intersection where the collision is about to happen, where 2 cars are on trajectories that will intersect in 3 minutes, where drivers are about to make the small errors in timing and attention that will result in impact, in injury, in one of the dozens of traffic accidents that happen in this city every night when people are tired and the roads are dark. The small mistakes that would be forgiven during the day become catastrophic at night when there are fewer witnesses, fewer interventions, fewer chances for someone to notice and correct before the correction becomes impossible. She drives to the intersection, arrives 2 minutes before the collision is scheduled to happen according to the broadcast, parks her patrol car in a position that blocks the lane where one of the cars would have been. That creates an obstacle that forces the driver to slow down, to change lanes, to pay attention in a way they would not have paid attention if the lane had been clear, if the path had been open, if the small error in timing that would have led to collision had been allowed to occur without intervention. The car that would have been hit drives through the intersection safely. The driver does not know that they were just saved from an accident that was going to happen but did not happen because Sarah was positioned exactly where she needed to be positioned to prevent it, because the broadcast showed what was coming and Sarah responded to what was shown, and the future that was broadcast 3 minutes ago has been changed, has been edited, has been revised from collision to near miss because someone was watching, and someone intervened, and someone made a choice that broke the pattern the broadcast was showing. But as Sarah watches the car drive away safely, she realizes something that makes her stomach tighten, that makes her hands grip the steering wheel harder than necessary. The broadcast did not show her intervention. The broadcast showed the collision happening. The broadcast showed both cars arriving at the intersection at exactly the same time and hitting each other with force that crumpled metal and shattered glass. The broadcast showed the outcome that would have occurred if no one had intervened. But the broadcast did not show Sarah arriving early and parking her car in a position that prevented the collision. The broadcast did not update to show the new future that her intervention created. The broadcast still shows the old future, the one where the accident happens, the one where people get hurt, the one where Sarah was not here or chose not to intervene or failed to intervene in time. She looks at her dashboard screen where the static has been showing the city 3 minutes ahead all night. The screen still shows this intersection. The screen still shows the collision happening. The screen shows 2 cars hitting each other right now. At this moment, even though Sarah is watching the actual intersection where no collision is occurring, where both cars have safely passed, where the accident that was broadcast has been prevented from happening, the broadcast is showing a future that did not happen. Or the broadcast is showing a future that did happen in a version of tonight that runs parallel to this version, that exists in the 3-minute gap between signal and reception. That is what tonight becomes in the timeline where Sarah did not intervene, where Sarah was not here, where Sarah made different choices or was prevented from making any choices at all. Her phone rings. The number is her own number. The call is coming from her own phone. She answers it even though answering a call from yourself is impossible, even though phones cannot call themselves, even though the number displayed on the screen should not be able to connect to the phone that is displaying it. She answers because impossible things have been happening all night, because the rules about what phones can do are apparently as flexible as the rules about what televisions can show, as negotiable as the rules about time flowing in one direction at one speed for all observers. The voice on the other end is her voice but not her voice. Her voice processed through the same filters or delays or distance that affected her voice when it came through the police radio earlier. The voice says, "You are preventing the futures we are showing. You are creating branches. You are making the broadcast split into multiple timelines. This is not what the system was designed to do. This is not what the signal is meant to accomplish. You need to stop intervening. You need to let the broadcast show you what happens when you do not change what is being shown." Sarah says, "Who is this? Who is broadcasting? Where is the signal coming from?" The voice says, "You are broadcasting. The signal is coming from you. From the version of you that exists 3 minutes ahead of where you are now. From the version of you that has already experienced what you are experiencing, and is transmitting that experience backward to warn you, to prepare you, to give you the information you need to make better choices, except you are making better choices, and that is creating paradoxes. That is creating timelines that should not exist. That is breaking the system that the broadcast was designed to create." The call ends. The line goes dead. Sarah is left holding a phone that called itself, that connected to itself, that allowed 2 versions of her separated by 3 minutes to have a conversation that should be impossible because you cannot talk to yourself, cannot receive information from your own future, cannot know what you are going to experience before you experience it, unless the normal rules about causality have been suspended or revised or broken by a broadcast system that someone built for reasons Sarah does not understand and is now using for purposes that even the builders might not have anticipated. Chapter 4. Sarah drives back to the warehouse where Torres is still sitting in the chair, still watching the televisions that show him watching televisions, still existing in the 3-minute loop that has become his entire reality, that has replaced his life with a recursive broadcast that shows him experiencing the broadcast that shows him experiencing the broadcast in an infinite regression that has no beginning and no end, just an eternal middle, where Torres sits and watches himself sit and watch. She needs to understand what happened to him. She needs to know what he saw that made him like this, that put him in this state, that transformed him from an active participant in his own life into a passive receiver of broadcasts about his life, into someone who watches himself instead of being himself, who experiences everything 3 minutes after it happens because he is stuck in the gap between signal and reception, between transmission and display, between the moment when something occurs and the moment when it appears on screen. The warehouse floor is covered in more liquid now. The liquid has spread. The liquid is deeper. Sarah has to wade through it to reach the chair where Torres sits. The liquid is cold and thick, and it pulls at her boots with each step, resists her movement in a way that water does not resist, that suggests this liquid has properties that water does not have, that suggests this liquid is not just a substance but is part of the broadcast system itself, is the medium through which the signal travels, is the material that connects the transmitter to the receiver, is what allows the future to communicate with the past by creating a physical bridge between moments that should be separated by time, but are connected by this liquid that exists in all the moments simultaneously. When Sarah reaches the chair, she sees that Torres's skin is wet, is covered in a thin layer of the liquid that coats the floor, is glistening under the work lights in a way that makes him look less like a person and more like a sculpture, like a statue made from flesh that has been preserved in some kind of solution, that has been prepared for display or storage or transmission. She reaches out to touch him, and her hand comes away wet, comes away coated in the same liquid, comes away changed because the liquid is not just on her skin now, it is in her skin, is being absorbed, is entering her bloodstream and her nervous system and her brain, where it will do whatever it does, where it will create whatever effects it creates, where it will transform her in whatever ways it transforms people who come into contact with it. She tries to wipe the liquid off, but it does not wipe off, does not come away, just spreads further across her skin, just soaks in deeper, just integrates itself more completely with her body until she cannot tell where her skin ends and the liquid begins, cannot distinguish between what is her and what is the broadcast medium that is now part of her, that is now inside her, that is now connecting her to the system that Torres is connected to, that is now making her into a receiver, into a screen, into a device that can display the broadcasts that come from 3 minutes ahead. The televisions on the wall change. Instead of showing the warehouse from multiple angles, they now show Sarah's perspective, show what she is seeing through her own eyes, show the warehouse from her position standing next to the chair where Torres sits. But the image on the televisions is not exactly what Sarah is seeing. The image is 3 minutes ahead. The image shows what Sarah will be seeing 3 minutes from now, shows her future perspective, shows the view she will have after she makes the choices she has not made yet, after she moves to positions she has not moved to yet, after she experiences moments that have not occurred yet but are being broadcast to her now, so she can see what is coming, so she can prepare, so she can make better choices, or at least make choices with full knowledge of where the choices lead. Sarah sees herself on the screens walking back through the warehouse toward the exit. She sees herself 3 minutes from now leaving Torres behind, leaving the warehouse behind, leaving the situation behind and getting back in her patrol car and driving to the next call that dispatch will send her to, the next emergency that requires intervention, the next future that the broadcast is showing 3 minutes before it arrives. She is watching herself make the choice to leave before she has consciously decided to leave, is seeing the future that results from a decision she has not made yet but will make, because the broadcast shows her making it, and the broadcast is always right, always shows what will happen because what will happen has already happened 3 minutes ahead. But Sarah does not want to leave. Sarah wants to stay here and understand what is happening to Torres, wants to figure out how to disconnect him from the broadcast system, wants to find a way to pull him out of the 3-minute loop he is stuck in and bring him back to the present, back to the timeline, where moments happen once in sequence instead of happening in recursive broadcasts that show you experiencing yourself forever. She wants to make a choice that is different from the choice the broadcast shows her making. She wants to prove that the future is not fixed, that the broadcasts are showing possibilities instead of certainties, that she has agency and free will and the ability to choose differently even when the screens are showing her choosing one way. She sits down on the floor next to Torres's chair, sits in the liquid that is cold and thick and is now inside her body as much as it is outside her body, sits in a position that the broadcast did not show, that was not on the screens 3 minutes ago, that represents a choice that was not predicted, that was not transmitted, that should not be possible if the broadcasts are actually showing what will happen instead of what might happen. The televisions flicker. The images destabilize. The broadcasts start to show multiple possibilities simultaneously. Start to show Sarah leaving, and Sarah staying, and Sarah doing other things, Sarah making other choices, Sarah creating branches in the timeline that was supposed to be singular, that was supposed to flow in one direction, that was supposed to show one future instead of many futures. The screens show Sarah in the warehouse, and Sarah in her patrol car, and Sarah at the police station, and Sarah at home, and Sarah in places she has never been, and making choices she has never considered, and living lives she has never lived, but that all exist in the space of possible futures that branch from this moment, from this choice to sit instead of leave, from this refusal to follow the script that the broadcast wrote for her. Torres's eyes move. For the first time since Sarah found him, his eyes move, tracking left to right, following the images on the televisions as they multiply, as they branch, as they show more and more versions of what comes next, because Sarah made a choice that created branches instead of following the path that would have kept the timeline singular. Torres's mouth opens. Torres speaks. The words come slowly, carefully, with the rhythm of someone who has not spoken in a long time, who has forgotten how speech works, who has to relearn the mechanics of turning thought into sound. Torres says, "You broke it. You made a choice they did not show. You created a branch they did not account for. The broadcast cannot handle multiple timelines. The broadcast was designed to show one future at a time, to guide everyone toward the same outcome, to eliminate choice by showing choice, to make free will irrelevant by predicting it perfectly. But you chose wrong. You chose differently. You broke the prediction, and now the system does not know what to show, because there are too many possibilities, too many branches, too many futures that all exist simultaneously because you refuse to follow the one that was broadcast." Chapter 5. Sarah helps Torres stand up from the chair, helps him walk through the warehouse toward the exit, helps him wade through the liquid that is now ankle-deep and rising, that is filling the warehouse like the warehouse is a container, like the walls are designed to hold this liquid, like the purpose of this building is not storage or manufacturing but containment, is keeping this substance in one place where it can be controlled, where it can be prevented from spreading to the rest of the city, where it can be used as a broadcast medium without contaminating the entire water supply, the entire infrastructure, the entire population. Torres walks slowly, unsteadily, like someone who has been sitting for a very long time and has forgotten how their legs work, who has to relearn the mechanics of movement after spending weeks or months or longer in the chair, watching broadcasts that showed him watching broadcasts. He leans on Sarah and she supports his weight, and together they move through the warehouse, while the televisions on the walls show them leaving from multiple angles, show them making different choices about which exit to use, show them encountering different obstacles, show them arriving at different outcomes based on small variations in path and timing and decision. Sarah asks Torres how long he has been in the warehouse. Torres says he does not know, says time does not work normally when you are watching the broadcasts, when you are seeing 3 minutes into the future constantly, when every moment you experience is a moment you already saw 3 minutes ago on a screen that showed you what you would be experiencing when you arrived at this moment. Says he came here to investigate the same kind of call Sarah investigated tonight, televisions turning themselves on and showing static that resolved into a parallel city, came here and found the chair and sat in it to rest for a moment, and then could not get up, could not leave, became part of the broadcast system, became a transmitter, became the source of the signal that was showing the city to itself 3 minutes in advance. He says the broadcast is not coming from a place, is coming from people, is coming from officers like him and like Sarah, who respond to calls in warehouses where the liquid is, who come into contact with the broadcast medium, and become receivers and then become transmitters, become part of the network that shows the city what is coming, that tries to prevent crimes and accidents by revealing them 3 minutes before they happen, that tries to create a safer city by eliminating surprise, by making everything predictable, by ensuring that everyone knows what is coming, and can prepare for it, and can make better choices accept better choices, create branches and branches create chaos, and chaos is what the system was designed to prevent. They reach the exit. The door is locked now, is sealed, is not letting them leave. Sarah pushes on it and pulls on it and tries to force it open, but the door does not move, does not budge, does not respond to force or leverage or any physical intervention because the door is not actually a door anymore, is not actually a barrier between inside and outside, but is a screen, is a display surface that is showing them the exit 3 minutes from now, is showing them what they will see when they reach the door in the future, but is not actually the door itself, is just a broadcast of the door, is just an image of escape that cannot be opened because you cannot walk through images, cannot pass through representations, cannot exit through broadcasts of exits. Sarah's phone shows static. Her radio shows static. Every screen she has access to is showing the same pattern, the same interference that resolves into images if you watch long enough, into futures if you wait 3 minutes, into possibilities if you make choices that the broadcast did not predict. She looks at the phone and sees herself looking at the phone 3 minutes from now, sees herself still standing at the exit trying to leave, sees herself still trapped in the warehouse with Torres, sees herself becoming what Torres became, becoming a permanent fixture, becoming a receiver that becomes a transmitter that shows the city to itself forever. Torres says they need to find the source. Says the broadcast has to be coming from somewhere central, somewhere that coordinates all the signals, somewhere that decides what to show and when to show it and who to show it to. Says when he was sitting in the chair he could feel connections to other chairs and other warehouses, could sense other people who were also watching broadcasts, could perceive the network that links all the receivers together into one system that covers the whole city, that sees everything 3 minutes before everything happens, that tries to control the future by revealing it. Sarah asks where the source is. Torres points down, says the source is below them, below the warehouse, below the foundation, below the city itself. Says there are levels beneath the surface that most people do not know about. Levels that were built before the city was built. Levels that have been here longer than the buildings. Levels that have infrastructure the modern city uses without understanding what it is using, without knowing where the signals come from, without realizing that the broadcast system that shows them the future has been operating for longer than anyone currently alive can remember. The liquid on the floor starts to drain. It flows toward the corners of the warehouse, where Sarah now sees there are grates, there are drains, there are openings that lead down into darkness, into pipes, into the infrastructure that carries the broadcast medium through the city, that distributes it to locations where receivers are needed, where transmitters can be created, where the network can expand by incorporating more people into its structure, by transforming more officers into broadcasters, by ensuring that the system that shows the future can keep showing the future, by recruiting the people whose job is to respond to calls about televisions turning themselves on and showing static that resolves into predictions. Sarah and Torres follow the liquid as it drains. They find stairs leading down, stairs that were not visible before when the liquid covered the floor, stairs that descended into darkness, into levels that exist below the warehouse, below the official basement, below the maps and blueprints and records that document what is supposed to be under this building. They descend. The stairs are slick with the broadcast medium. The walls are covered in screens, small screens embedded in the concrete, showing the city from thousands of angles, showing every street and every building and every person who is currently moving through the city, 3 minutes ahead of where they currently are, showing the entire urban area as it will be in 3 minutes, showing the future of everyone simultaneously, showing possibilities that branch and diverge and multiply as people make choices that were not predicted, that were not shown, that create new timelines the broadcast system struggles to display. They reach a landing. The landing opens into a large chamber that extends in directions that should not exist under a warehouse, that should require them to be under the river or under other buildings or under parts of the city that are miles away from where they started. The chamber is filled with chairs, hundreds of chairs. Each chair has a person sitting in it. Each person is watching screens that surround them on all sides, that show them the future from every angle, that display what they will experience 3 minutes from now, and 3 minutes after that, and 3 minutes after that, in an endless progression that keeps them locked in place, that keeps them watching, that keeps them transmitting the signals that allow everyone else in the city to see 3 minutes ahead. Chapter 6. Sarah recognizes some of the people in the chairs. She recognizes officers she worked with years ago, officers who left the force or transferred to different cities, or disappeared under circumstances that were never fully explained. She recognizes civilians she has seen before, people from the neighborhoods she patrols, people she has talked to during investigations, people who were witnesses or victims or just people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and made the mistake of touching the broadcast medium, of coming into contact with the liquid that transforms receivers into transmitters, that incorporates individuals into the network that shows the city to itself. The screens that surround the chairs are not showing 3 minutes ahead anymore. The screens are showing multiple time frames simultaneously, showing 1 minute ahead and 5 minutes ahead and 10 minutes ahead and hours ahead and days ahead, showing near futures and distant futures, showing all the possible outcomes that branch from every choice being made right now by everyone in the city, showing the exponential multiplication of possibilities that results from millions of people making millions of decisions every moment, and each decision creating new branches, new timelines, new futures that all exist simultaneously in the space of what might happen. Torres says this is what happened to him. Says he sat in the chair and started seeing one future 3 minutes ahead. Started seeing what he would be doing, where he would be going, what choices he would be making. But then the broadcast started showing him 2 futures, 2 different outcomes based on 2 different choices he might make. And then 4 futures, and then 8, and then the exponential growth of possibilities became too much, became overwhelming, became a flood of information about all the things that might happen if he made this choice or that choice or no choice at all. Became paralyzing because how do you make a decision when you can see every possible outcome of that decision? When you know exactly what will happen if you choose A, and exactly what will happen if you choose B, and exactly what will happen if you choose C, and the outcomes are all different, but none of them are clearly better or worse, are all just different branches that lead to different futures that all exist in potential until you make the choice that collapses the possibilities into one actuality. Sarah asks who built this? Who created the broadcast system? Who decided that the city needed to see itself 3 minutes ahead? Torres points to a figure at the center of the chamber, a figure sitting in a larger chair, a chair that is connected to more screens than the others, a chair that appears to be the hub, the source, the origin point for all the signals that radiate outward through the city, that turn televisions into windows onto the future, that transform receivers into transmitters, that create the network that sees everything before it happens. The figure in the central chair is an old woman. She is thin and still, and her eyes are closed, but Sarah can see that she is breathing, can see the small movements that indicate life, can see evidence that she is not dead, but is not exactly alive either, is existing in a state between, is occupying a position that is neither participant nor observer, but is both simultaneously, is watching the broadcasts and creating the broadcasts and being broadcast all at the same time, in a recursive loop that has been running for so long that the woman has become less a person and more a process, less an individual and more a system, less someone who operates the network and more someone who is the network. Sarah approaches the central chair. The screens around it show her approaching from every angle, show her 3 minutes from now reaching out to touch the woman, show her making contact with the central node of the broadcast system, show her becoming connected to the network in a way that will transform her from a receiver into something else, into a part of the infrastructure, into a component of the system that sees and shows and knows what is coming before it comes. But Sarah does not want to touch the woman, does not want to become more connected to the system than she already is, already has the broadcast medium in her bloodstream, already can feel it changing her, already can sense the beginnings of the connection that will allow her to receive signals, to see the future, to know what is coming 3 minutes before it arrives. She stops before making contact, stops before reaching the point of no return, stops and asks the question that has been building since she found Torres in the warehouse. Why? The woman's eyes open. The woman looks at Sarah with eyes that are clouded with cataracts, but also with something else, with a kind of knowing that goes beyond sight, that is more like perception or awareness or direct access to information that does not require eyes to receive. The woman says, because the city asked for it, because the people wanted to know what was coming, because crime and accidents and tragedies happen when people do not know what is about to happen to them, when they make choices without information, when they walk into futures that harm them because they had no warning, no preparation, no 3-minute head start that would allow them to avoid the danger, to make better choices, to survive what would otherwise kill them. The woman says, I built this system 50 years ago. I built it because my daughter died in an accident that I could have prevented if I had known 3 minutes earlier that it was going to happen, if I had received a warning that would have allowed me to call her, to tell her to wait, to change her route, to make a different choice that would have saved her life. I built it because I had the knowledge and the technology and the anger, because I had the grief that drives people to remake the world, to change the rules, to build systems that prevent other people from experiencing the loss that broke me. The woman says it worked. For decades it worked. People received warnings. People made better choices. Crime decreased because criminals could be caught before they committed crimes, could be stopped 3 minutes before they acted, could be prevented from ever becoming criminals at all if the interventions happened early enough, if the warnings reached the right people at the right time. Accidents decreased because people knew 3 minutes in advance what was going to happen, could avoid collisions, could prevent fires, could save lives that would otherwise be lost to chance and bad timing, and the thousand small errors that kill people every day when no one is watching closely enough to intervene. The woman says, "But then the system grew. It grew beyond what I designed, beyond what I intended, beyond what any single person could control. It started incorporating more transmitters, started transforming more receivers into parts of the network, started expanding until it covered the whole city, until every screen could receive the broadcasts, until everyone was watching the future all the time, until people stopped living in the present, because the present was always 3 minutes behind what they could see on screens, was always obsolete, was always the past by the time they experienced it, because they had already seen it coming, had already prepared for it, had already made the choices that the broadcast showed them making." Chapter 7. The woman reaches out slowly and touches a control panel that Sarah had not noticed before. A panel built into the arm of the chair. A panel covered in buttons and switches and displays that show information Sarah cannot read, that use symbols Sarah does not recognize, that appear to be controls for the broadcast system but might be something else, might be controls for systems that go beyond broadcasting, that affect not just what people see, but what actually happens, that change reality instead of just showing reality, 3 minutes in advance. The screens around the chamber change. Instead of showing multiple futures, they now show multiple pasts, show different versions of how the city has developed over the last 50 years, show timelines where the broadcast system was never built, and timelines where it was built but was shut down, and timelines where it expanded even faster than it did in this timeline, where it incorporated the entire population into the network, where everyone became receivers and transmitters simultaneously, where the distinction between experiencing events and watching events collapsed completely, because everyone was always watching themselves experience things 3 minutes after they saw themselves about to experience them. The woman says, "I have run the simulations. I have tested the outcomes. I have watched 50 years of possible futures branch from the moment I decided to build this system, and in most of those futures the system causes more harm than it prevents, creates more problems than it solves, makes people less safe instead of more safe because safety requires the ability to respond to surprise, requires the capacity to adapt to unexpected circumstances, requires resilience that can only be built through experience of the unknown rather than through perpetual foreknowledge of what is coming." The woman says, "But I cannot shut it down, cannot turn it off, cannot dismantle what I built because too many people depend on it now. Too many systems have integrated it into their operations. Too many parts of the city have adapted to having 3-minute warnings that removing the warnings would cause chaos, would cause deaths, would cause more harm than leaving the system running, even though the system is harming people by transforming them into transmitters, by incorporating them into the network, by making them into parts of the infrastructure, instead of letting them remain individuals with agency and choice and the freedom to be surprised." Sarah says, "You could warn people. You could broadcast information about what the system does, about how it transforms receivers into transmitters, about the fact that touching the broadcast medium will make them part of the network. You could give people the choice about whether to participate instead of tricking them into participation, instead of spreading the liquid through the city without telling anyone what it does, without getting consent from the people whose bodies and minds you are incorporating into your system." The woman says, "I have warned people. I have broadcast warnings about the warnings. I have shown people what happens when they come into contact with the medium, when they respond to calls about televisions showing static, when they investigate warehouses where the liquid has accumulated. But people do not listen to warnings about abstract future harms when they are focused on concrete present problems, when they have jobs to do and protocols to follow, and immediate concerns that take priority over theoretical risks that might or might not materialize depending on choices they have not made yet." The woman says, "You received the warnings. Your phone showed you the static. Your screens showed you the parallel city. Your instincts told you that something was wrong in the warehouse, that you should not touch the liquid, that you should not stay too long in places where the broadcast medium has accumulated. But you came anyway. You investigated anyway. You touched Torres anyway. You absorbed the medium anyway because your job required it, because your training demanded it, because your sense of duty to help people in danger overrode your sense of self-preservation, your caution about unknown substances, your awareness that something about this situation was not normal, and participation might come with costs that you did not want to pay. Sarah looks at her hands. The hands are still wet with the broadcast medium. The hands are still absorbing the liquid. The hands are still being transformed into receivers, and will soon become transmitters if the process continues, if the integration completes, if she does not find a way to reverse what has already started happening to her body, to her nervous system, to her brain that is beginning to receive signals from 3 minutes ahead, that is beginning to see what is coming before it arrives, that is beginning to experience the future, the way Torres experienced it, the way all the people in chairs experience it, as something that happens before it happens, as something that is watched before it is lived, as something that transforms experience into performance, because you are always playing the role you saw yourself play 3 minutes ago, on screens that showed you what you would be doing when you arrived at this moment. Torres says, there is a way to reverse it. There is a way to purge the broadcast medium from your system before it fully integrates. But the reversal has to happen soon, has to happen before the medium reaches the brain, has to happen before the transformation completes and you become a permanent part of the network, before you become unable to leave, before you become like me, like the people in the chairs, like everyone who came into contact with the liquid and absorbed it and became transmitters, who send signals to receivers who absorb the signals and become transmitters in an expanding network that grows by incorporating everyone who tries to understand it, everyone who tries to help people trapped in it, everyone who responds to calls about televisions showing static, because responding to calls is their job and their training and their commitment to helping people, even when helping people means putting yourself at risk. Sarah asks, how do I reverse it? Torres says, you have to go deeper. You have to descend to the lowest level of the system, to the foundation where the broadcast medium originates, to the source where the liquid is produced or collected or manifested from whatever dimension or timeline or state of reality it comes from. You have to find the place where the medium enters this world, and you have to interrupt the flow, stop the production, prevent more liquid from entering the system and spreading through the city and transforming more people into receivers and transmitters. The woman in the central chair says, the source is 17 levels below where you are standing now. 17 levels that were built before the city, that have existed longer than human civilization in this region, that are part of infrastructure that predates modern understanding of what infrastructure is. The levels descend into bedrock, into geological formations that have properties conventional science does not account for, into spaces where the rules about time and causality are different, where the future can communicate with the past because the distinction between future and past is not as absolute as we assume it to be. When we live only in the present, when we experience only one moment at a time moving in one direction at one speed. She presses buttons on the control panel, and a section of the chamber floor slides open, revealing stairs that descend into darkness, into depths that should not exist under a warehouse, that should require them to be underwater or in the Earth's mantle, or somewhere that geography and geology say should be impossible but that exists anyway, because the broadcast system requires it to exist, because the network needs foundations deeper than normal foundations, needs connections to levels of reality that normal infrastructure does not access. Chapter 8. Sarah descends the stairs with Torres following behind her. They descend through 17 levels that each look like the last level, that each contain chambers filled with chairs and screens and people who sit watching broadcasts of themselves, sitting and watching broadcasts in loops that have been running for years or decades or longer. They descend through levels where the architecture becomes older, where the building materials transition from concrete to stone to something that is not quite stone, that is more like crystallized time, like solidified causality, like the physical manifestation of the relationship between cause and effect frozen into a substance that can be carved and shaped and built into walls and floors and ceilings. The broadcast medium flows down the stairs like water flows down drains, like it is being pulled by gravity toward the source, toward the origin point where it enters this reality from wherever it comes from whatever dimension or timeline or state of existence produces liquids that can transmit information backward through time, that can show people the future by making them part of a network that exists 3 minutes ahead of itself, that is always broadcasting what will happen because what will happen has already happened in the version of the network that runs slightly faster than the version people are currently experiencing. They reach the lowest level, the 17th level, the foundation, the source. The chamber here is different from the chambers above. This chamber is not filled with chairs and screens. This chamber is filled with the broadcast medium itself, filled with liquid that covers the floor to a depth of several feet, that glows with its own light, that pulses with rhythm that matches Sarah's heartbeat and Torres's heartbeat, and the heartbeat of everyone in the city who has absorbed even the smallest amount of the medium, who has become even slightly connected to the network that shows the future to the present. In the center of the chamber is a structure that Sarah does not have words for, that does not correspond to anything she has seen before, that is not quite a machine, and not quite an organism, but is something that combines properties of both, that appears to be grown as much as built, that has components that pulse and flow and process information through mechanisms that are not electronic or mechanical or biological, but are something else, something that operates according to principles that Sarah's training and education and experience have not prepared her to understand. Torres says, "This is the source. This is where the broadcast medium originates. This is the device or entity or phenomenon that produces the liquid, that sends it up through the levels, that distributes it through the city via pipes and drains and infrastructure that was built to carry water, but now carries something else, carries the substance that transforms receivers into transmitters, that incorporates individuals into the network, that expands the system by spreading through the population one contact at a time, one absorption at a time, one transformation at a time." Sarah asks, "Can we destroy it?" Torres says, "I do not know." Says he has never been this deep before, has never descended to the source, has never seen the origin point of the system that he became part of when he sat in a chair and started watching broadcasts and could not stop watching, could not leave, could not return to the surface until Sarah found him and helped him stand and guided him down through 17 levels to this chamber where the broadcast medium glows and pulses and generates itself continuously, endlessly, with no sign of depletion or exhaustion or any limit to how much liquid it can produce, how far it can spread, how many people it can transform. Sarah approaches the structure at the center of the chamber. The structure does not react to her approach, does not defend itself, does not prevent her from getting close. She reaches out to touch it, and the moment her hand makes contact, she sees everything, sees the entire network simultaneously, sees every screen in the city showing every possible future to every person who is watching, sees the exponential multiplication of timelines that branch from every choice being made right now, sees the overwhelming complexity of a system that was designed to show one future 3 minutes ahead, but has evolved or expanded or mutated into a system that shows all futures simultaneously, that displays every possibility to everyone all at once, until the distinction between what will happen and what might happen collapses and people cannot make choices anymore because they can see all the outcomes of all the choices, and the outcomes are all equally real, all equally valid, all equally true in the timelines where they occur. She sees Torres in his warehouse, sitting in his chair, unable to leave because he is seeing too many futures, seeing too many versions of himself, making too many different choices that lead to too many different outcomes, and the paralysis that results from perfect information about all possibilities is worse than the uncertainty that comes from knowing nothing, is worse than making choices blindly, because at least blind choices can be made, can be executed, can lead to outcomes that then become the new present from which new choices branch. She sees herself in the chamber, 17 levels below a warehouse, touching a structure that generates the broadcast medium, sees herself making a choice about whether to destroy the source or leave it intact, sees both futures simultaneously, sees the timeline where she destroys it, sees the consequences of both choices branching into thousands of sub-timelines based on how she destroys it, or how she leaves it, or what happens in the moments after the choice, when other people respond to what she has done or not done. And she sees that destruction is not simple, is not just a matter of breaking the structure, or shutting it down, or disrupting its operation because the structure is connected to something larger, something that extends beyond this chamber, beyond these 17 levels, beyond the city itself. The structure is a terminal, is a receiving station, is a local manifestation of something that exists in multiple locations simultaneously, that has branches in other cities, other timelines, other versions of reality, where broadcast systems were also built by people who wanted to prevent tragedies, who wanted to see the future, who wanted to warn the past about what was coming, even though warnings about the future change the future and create paradoxes that the system struggles to resolve. Epilogue. Sarah removes her hand from the structure, steps back, Looks at Torres, who is standing in the glowing liquid that reaches his knees, who is waiting for her to make a choice, who is hoping she will choose to destroy the source because destroying it might free him, might disconnect him from the network, might allow him to stop seeing the future and start experiencing the present again, start living in moments as they occur instead of watching moments 3 minutes after he already saw them coming. But Sarah knows that destroying this source will not destroy the system, knows that the broadcast network extends beyond this chamber, beyond this city, beyond this timeline, knows that shutting down the local terminal will just redirect the medium to flow through other channels, through other cities, through other people who will become receivers and transmitters, and will expand the network in new directions, in new populations, in new locations that do not yet know what is coming, but will know soon because the broadcasts always spread, always find new screens, always reach new audiences who think they want to see the future until they see it, and realize that seeing the future ruins the present by making every moment a repetition of something that was already watched, already known, already experienced 3 minutes ago on a screen. She knows that the only way to truly stop the broadcasts is not to destroy the infrastructure but to stop watching, to refuse to look at the screens that show what is coming, to choose blindness over foresight, to accept uncertainty over perfect information, to live in the present without knowing what the next 3 minutes will bring, without seeing yourself make choices before you make them, without experiencing life as a performance of actions you already saw yourself perform. She tells Torres, we cannot destroy it, but we can leave it, can walk away, can choose to not be part of the network even though the medium is in our blood, even though we have been transformed into receivers, can refuse to watch the broadcasts, even when the broadcasts are showing us what we are about to do, can close our eyes to the screens and make choices without knowing the outcomes and accept that some of those choices will lead to harm. But at least they will be our choices, made blindly but freely, executed without perfect information but with genuine agency. Torres says, I do not know if I can do that. Do not know if I can live without seeing what is coming. Have been watching the broadcasts for so long that the present feels wrong, feels delayed, feels like something that already happened 3 minutes ago instead of something that is happening now. Do not know if I can go back to making choices without seeing where the choices lead, without knowing which timeline I am creating, without having perfect information about all the possible futures that branch from every decision. Sarah says, neither do I. Says she is terrified of not knowing what is coming. Says the broadcasts have shown her accidents she prevented, crimes she stopped, lives she saved by arriving 3 minutes before danger arrived, by intervening before harm occurred, by using the information the network provided to make the city safer, to reduce suffering, to prevent the tragedies that would have happened if no one had been warned. But she also says the cost is too high. The cost of perfect foresight is the loss of genuine experience, the transformation of life into performance, the conversion of every moment into a repetition of something already seen. The cost is becoming like the people in the chairs who sit and watch themselves sit and watch in loops that never end, that never progress, that never lead anywhere except back to watching, back to receiving broadcasts, back to being part of a network that sees everything but experiences nothing, that knows everything but understands nothing, that shows the future perfectly but robs the present of meaning. She takes Torres's hand, says we leave together. We walk up 17 levels back to the surface. We get in the patrol car. We drive away from the warehouse. We do not look at screens. We do not watch broadcasts. We choose blindness. We choose uncertainty. We choose to not know what is coming 3 minutes from now, because not knowing is the price of actually living, of experiencing moments as they occur, instead of watching moments that have already been experienced by the version of us that exists 3 minutes ahead. Torres squeezes her hand, says okay, says I will try. Says I cannot promise I will succeed, but I will try to not watch, will try to not look at screens, will try to live in the present even though the present feels wrong after so long watching futures, feels slow and delayed, and always 3 minutes behind where it should be. They walk up the stairs together. They ascend through 17 levels while screens on every level show them ascending, show them 3 minutes ahead, climbing the same stairs, making the same choices, having the same conversation about whether to watch or not watch, whether to participate in the network or refuse participation, whether to accept the broadcasts or close their eyes and choose blindness. Sarah does not look at the screens. keeps her eyes on the stairs, on Torres, on the physical reality of ascending, instead of on the broadcast reality of what she will be doing 3 minutes from now. It is hard. The screens pull at her attention. The broadcasts call to her to watch, to see what is coming, to prepare for the next moment by seeing it before it arrives. But she resists, keeps climbing, keeps focusing on the present, even though the present feels empty, feels thin, feels incomplete without the knowledge of what comes next. They reach the surface, the warehouse. The liquid is draining, is flowing back down to the source, is being pulled back into the system as if the system knows they are leaving, as if the network is letting them go, as if participation is optional after all and they are choosing to opt out, are choosing to disconnect, are choosing to no longer be receivers even though the medium is still in their blood, is still in their nervous systems, is still connecting them to the broadcasts that they are choosing not to watch. Sarah's patrol car is where she left it. The dashboard screen shows static. The static resolves into the image of Sarah and Torres getting into the car 3 minutes from now, starting the engine, driving away from the warehouse toward the police station where questions will be asked about where they have been, what they were doing, why they disappeared for hours while every television in the city was showing static, while every screen was broadcasting futures that did not quite arrive the way they were shown. Because people made different choices, created branches, refused to follow the timelines that were predicted. Sarah does not watch the dashboard screen. Starts the engine without looking at what the broadcast shows her doing 3 minutes from now. Drives without checking whether the route she is choosing is the route the screens show her choosing. Makes turns without knowing whether the turns will lead to safety or danger, whether she is driving toward or away from accidents that might be prevented if she watched the broadcasts, if she used the 3-minute warning to make better choices, if she participated in the system that was designed to keep people safe by showing them what is coming. The city outside the car windows is dark. It is still night. It is still the same night it was when Sarah first responded to the call about televisions showing static, when she started investigating apartments where screens had turned themselves on, when she entered the warehouse and found Torres and touched the liquid and became part of the broadcast network that she is now choosing to leave, even though leaving is not the same as being free, is not the same as being disconnected, is not the same as being removed from the system that has already transformed her, that has already made her into a receiver who will always be able to see the broadcasts if she chooses to look at screens, if she chooses to watch, if she chooses to participate. Torres says the screens will always be there. The broadcasts will always be showing. The network will always be offering to show us what comes next. We will have to choose every day to not watch, to not look, to not use the information that is being transmitted to us constantly through every screen we encounter, every device we carry, every surface that can display images of futures that are always 3 minutes ahead of the present we are trying to live in. Sarah says, I know. Says it will be hard. Says there will be times when not watching means people get hurt, means crimes happen that could have been prevented, means accidents occur that 3-minute warnings could have stopped. Says we will have to live with that. We'll have to accept that perfect safety is not possible, that preventing all harm is not achievable, that the cost of trying to see and prevent everything is the loss of the ability to genuinely experience anything. They drive through the city while screens everywhere show them driving, show them 3 minutes ahead of where they currently are, show them making choices they have not made yet, show them futures they are choosing not to watch because watching ruins the present, because seeing what is coming makes the arrival feel like repetition, because knowing destroys surprise and surprise is necessary for genuine experience, for actual living, for being present in moments instead of watching moments that have already been experienced by the version of you that exists 3 minutes ahead. The sun is starting to rise. The night is ending. The shift is changing. Sarah and Torres drive toward the police station where they will file reports about what they found in the warehouse, about the broadcast system, about the choice they made to leave it intact but refuse to participate, about the decision to blind themselves to futures that are always being shown on screens across the city, always being transmitted from 3 minutes ahead, always being offered to anyone willing to watch, willing to see, willing to trade the present for perfect information about what the next 3 minutes will bring. And somewhere 17 levels below a warehouse, the source continues generating broadcast medium, continues producing the liquid that flows through the city, continues sending signals to screens that show futures to people who watch or do not watch, depending on whether they choose information or experience, whether they choose safety or surprise, whether they choose to know what is coming or to live in the uncertainty that is the only genuine form of presence, the only authentic way of experiencing moments as they occur, instead of as repetitions of moments already seen, already known, already watched 3 minutes before they arrive.